Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel, welcome to 2020, and we start big with an official announcement from Canon of a 1DX Mark III being released, and I've done some researching, some notes and stuff like that, and I've put together a list of specs that I thought would be interesting to go over. Some of them are going to be compared with the Mark II, but in general I'm going to try and run through most of the new specs and some of really interesting specs in this camera, which is probably going to be the greatest DSLR Pro sport shooting camera ever made. However, I have this feeling that it might as well be the last as well. If Canon can make this into a mirrorless kind of shape, well, then Sony is probably gonna have to work even harder, because these specs are absolutely insane, and since there are so many of them, we're gonna get into them. I have divided this in categories, so I've got body, I've got sensor, processing type, memory, photo specs with some focusing stuff, video specs with some focusing stuff, some more focusing stuff, and the things it doesn't have. So body, so the size wise, the 1DX Mark III is exactly the same as the 1DX Mark II. If you really want to know in millimeters, it's 158 by 167.6 by 82.6, exactly the same as 1DX Mark II. It rocks pretty much exactly the same magnesium alloy body, which is fully weather sealed. Same battery, which means if you're a 1DX Mark II user and you have a couple of batteries, don't worry, you'll be able to use them in Mark III as well. It has been made more efficient, so with the same type of battery you can get a longer life, probably more efficient processing, more efficient memory and all that stuff. We're gonna get into that. 3.2 inch 2.1 million dot screen, full touchscreen. Whatever you touch, whatever menu you are in, settings, full touchscreen. That's something new, that's something really very cool. Another cool feature, finally they have implemented the back illuminated buttons. With all these kind of little upgrades and the same battery and same body, they've managed to make it 90 grams lighter than the Mark II. This one comes into 1250 grams and the old one was 1340 grams. So this is even lighter. We're gonna go down to the sensor type now. Sensor is pretty much the same, but not the same at all. So it's 20.1 megapixel full frame CMOS sensor, which is brand new, completely reworked sensor. So that's completely new. Resolution the same. Some of you might be a little bit upset about the kind of smaller megapixel count, because other camera manufacturers are going to 24, 28, 32 megapixels, but I assume for the focus of this camera, which is probably Olympics and sport shooting and all that goodness, 20 megapixels are probably just enough for most of professional shooters out there. It does have a new kind of type of high detail low pass filter, which kind of makes you feel like that there is no low pass filter to have all this high detail, but I know some of you probably are gonna say if you want a high detail and high resolution, all that good stuff, you don't need low pass filter whatsoever, but there is one in this camera. ISO range from natively from 100 to 102,400, expandable to low 50 and high 1, high 2, high 3 of 819,200. It does have 191 focusing points, of which 155 are cross type. Obviously, because it's an optical viewfinder, not an electronic viewfinder, they're all kind of clamped in the middle, just like DSLRs tend to have their focusing points placed in their optical viewfinders. Next thing we're going to be talking about processing power, and it's the new digit X. It says X. I know people are gonna want to say maybe digit 10, but it says X and I see an X and I think it's an X or 10. It's totally up to you. Just because it says X, I'm gonna say X. So it's new digit X10 processor, which is apparently 3.1 times faster than the two digit 6 plus processors and the 1DX Mark II. Some people are going to be super excited. I think most of the people are going to be super excited. We do still have 2 card slots obviously, but this time we do have 2 CEF Express cards which are insanely fast. You can get cards in the market that go up to like 1500 to almost 2 gigs per second, which Canon claims you can, with this processing power and with this memory, they claim you can shoot RAW plus JPEG over 1000 images and you will not outrun the buffer. So I don't know what you're doing in your life if you have to take more than 1000 images in a row. I would like to say you're probably never gonna outrun this buffer ever. That is an absolutely insane buffer. So now we're gonna dive into some of the photo specs that I thought were really interesting. So it does 16 frames a second mechanical shutter with full autofocus. You're gonna have this, I guess, this kind of new thing, head tracking, full tracking, face tracking in the viewfinder, which I thought it was kind of interesting, which I haven't seen in DSLRs before. That was really cool. And then it's gonna do 20 frames per second when you flip away the mirror and it effectively becomes a mirrorless in a live view. It's gonna do 20 frames a second either with mechanical shutter or the silent shooting, again with the head and face detect, which is pretty cool in 20 frames per second. I guess I had to mention, it does say that there's going to be an auto exposure and autofocus throughout this process when you're doing 20 frames a second in live view, so bear that in mind. Of course, since you have flipped up your mirror and you're doing the live view, the optical viewfinder kind of becomes useless because it's just going to be black because the mirror has been flipped up and you're not going to be able to see anything through, so you're going to have to pretty much shoot handheld like this, which if you have a longer or heavier lens in front of you might be a bit tricky, but that's what they figured they're going to do with the photo specs. Now we're going to swiftly move to video specs, which are almost not Canon-like because we've known in past they tend to cripple some of the specs. And they haven't sort of this time, so you can shoot 10-bit 4K 422 60 frames per second. That's insane with C-Log, by the way, and you can shoot 12-bit 5.5K RAW 60 frames a second C-Log. I know you have many questions at this point. 4K 5.5K 60 frames a second, is it cropped? Where's the catch? It isn't cropped, it's full frame as well. There are options you can go down into the crop if you want to, but then you're thinking, why would you go into the crop if you can do it in full frame? However, you might want to go to 4K crop, because when you're shooting the 4K full frame and 5.5K full frame at 60 frames a second, you do not get autofocus whatsoever. When you go down to 4K 60 crop, you do get autofocus features, so that might be the deal breaker for you. Or if you're not that fast with manual focus, then you can always do manual focus in full frame 60 at 5.5K or 4K. There's no zebra lines to help out with your exposure. However, there is focus peaking, so that should help significantly with your focusing, since there is no autofocus in some of those video modes that you probably would have liked to have autofocus. And then you still keep 1080p 120 frames per second slow motion with no audio, which it's not a biggie, but I guess for the most of the time if you shoot B-roll or any kind of slow motion, you don't use the original audio anyways, unless you want to keep the original audio in a normal speed as like a part of a sound design or something. You know, you have this car drifting in slow-mo, but you still want that engine rev in a normal speed on the background for sound design, then you will not be able to get that because the 120p does not have audio coming out at all, so it's just gonna silent slow-mo. Updates for dual pixel AF, mirror locked up and you're shooting through the live view. The dual pixel AF has been updated and apparently it's even better than it was. Oh, the light changed a lot. 3869 focus points, and don't get mixed up with the 191 which you would see through your optical viewfinder. Now we're talking live view and on the screen. 3869 focus points, which are pretty much all the way top to bottom and almost edge to edge, around 90% coverage of your screen on the back of the camera. Obviously, because you have so many focusing points, there are 525 automatic areas that you can select. Obviously, you wouldn't be selecting 3000 focusing points one by one. That would take forever to move across the screen, obviously. And you get this head, face and eye detect, head, face and eye AF, sorry, when you're doing this, which is really cool. And the things that this camera does not have, some of you might be laughing about this, it has no pop-up flash, as you would expect, obviously, the professional camera. That helps with the weather seal as well. So we do not have pop-up flash, you do not have IBIS, which there was rumored stuff going on that might have an IBIS or hybrid mount for RF lenses or whatever. It's just a regular EF mount. It does not have IBIS in there, so therefore I think the Nikon or any other company that would come up with a Pro DSLR now for Olympics probably would not have an IBIS. Canon actually should work on IBIS for the mirrorless, since they do not have it even in the mirrorless. And as of launch, in 1080p you do not get 24 frames per second, but that's only as of launch. Canon says with the coming firmware update they will enable this option. And that is all my spec sheet, as confusing as probably I gave it to you. Those are the specs. Some of the specs are really super cool. Forgot to mention the 4K is downsampled from the 5.5K, so should be extremely sharp. I don't know if that not having an autofocus in full frame 60, 5.5K or 4K, is that a deal breaker? I really don't think so. If you're shooting that sort of video and you're buying that kind of camera, you're shooting professionally, you're shooting with really cool, probably cine lenses, or you know, just good lenses in general, you're probably going to be focusing manually anyways. If they could implement this stuff in the shape of mirrorless, well then good luck any other competition that wants to go into the mirrorless, including Sony as well, because some of these specs would blow away Sony A9 II even at this point if this would be a mirrorless camera. So probably Sony has a little thinking to do to kind of future-proof, because at the moment in mirrorless I would like to say they're probably the best out there in the market, but this is a little sign that they might need to be careful about their future releases. Thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, make sure you check around for more of my videos, subscribe if you haven't already, comment down below what you think about these specs, what do you like, what you don't like, and I will see you guys in the next videos. That's a big start for 2020. Bye bye.